Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn session and taking time out of your busy days. I'm Sarah Klossick, I'm the Council Strategic Marketing Manager and I'll be hosting today's session. So today is the first in a series of Lunch and Learns we've got focusing on key themes from around the Council plan. So hopefully you're aware that today's session is around climate change and sustainability, and then coming up on the 7th of April at the same time we've got the next one on the Commonwealth Games. So at some point during the session I'll share the link in the chat for you to register for that session too. You'll be pleased to know that if you're joining as an attendee, there's no access to your camera or mic, so you can eat your lunch in peace if it's lunchtime and watch and listen away. However, you do have access to a Q&A typed feature, which we really encourage you to use to add in your questions or comments. So yeah, please do pop your questions in the box as we go along. If they're for a specific presenter, just pop their name in and we'll either answer as we go along or we'll come back to it at the end for the Q&A session. Just to bear in mind that the session is being recorded today, so any questions you ask, if they are published, they will form part of the recording. We've got a range of presenters today covering some brilliant topics, and to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to Mary Morrissey, the Director of Economy and Infrastructure, for an introduction on today's topic. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. It is just afternoon, and as Sarah's already said, first I'd like to say thank you all for attending this first Lunch and Learn session today. Hopefully you're going to enjoy it and get a lot out of it. Please feel free to ask some questions as well, because as Sarah says, we've got a top team here ready to answer for you. So as you should be aware, during our bit on climate change and the sustainability is vitally important to both the council and the wider borough. And the commitment to climate change can clearly be seen in the council plan, where action in our climate change declaration is one of 3 major outcome areas. As you'll hopefully be aware, the council set really ambitious targets to achieve net zero, both as a borough by 2041 and really importantly by 2030 for our council's operational emissions. And you'll be hearing an awful lot about that, what that actually means in practice in the rest of the session. And it's not just about climate change, it's also really important we look at the wider sustainability issues, such as improving biodiversity across the borough and air quality. So we're making great progress in terms of our climate change plans, and recently Climate Emergency UK, which is an independent charity, ranked our plan as the 5th best out of all 409 local and combined authorities. So it's absolutely fantastic and great testament to the work we've already done, particularly with the team led by Anne-Marie and Andrew. So we know what we need to do, we've written it down, and now it's time to put our plans into action. As people will have seen on the TV, recent years and months have showed the appalling effects of climate change across the globe. We've seen wildfires, we've seen flooding, we've seen heat waves, we've seen some really extreme events that are happening, so much more than the 1 in 100-year event we all kind of grew up with. And the transition to a net zero society will touch every aspect of our lives. So really, it's only by working together, and that's when you all come in, can we achieve our net zero aims, our council's ambitions. So I'd like to say thanks very much again for joining today. Please take part, listen, learn, and of course lunch, because we can't see you, as Sarah says, and I hope you enjoy the session. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that, Mary. So next up, my colleague Sam Thorne and I are going to tell you a bit about the new climate change branding that you should start to see popping up around the borough. As there's so much wonderful work going on across the council in this area, we wanted to try and badge up all the projects and activity under one brand. So as you should be able to see on your screen now, the brand is called Your Future Solihull, and here is the logo as well. So the idea is that everything we're doing in the fight to combat climate change is for the future of Solihull, it's for future generations, but it's also obviously part of the wider global issues. And we've got loads of brilliant businesses who across the borough who are leading the way on green tech and sustainable industry. So that's where the idea for the logo and the name has come from. We'll be using this logo on anything related to climate change and sustainability going forward. So if you're working on a project where you think it would be useful to include this as part of your branding, then please speak to your comms officer as you would when you're creating any sort of collateral in terms of pull up banners or something for social media, and they'll be able to help integrate this. We'd like to use it as widely as possible, really. I'm now going to pass you over to Sam, who's going to cover a little bit about the Your Future Solihull website hub.
Thanks, Sarah. So my name is Sam Thorne. I'm a marketing communications officer working on climate change and sustainability. And yeah, just touch on the website hub and the plans we have for Your Future Solihull regarding the council website. So I'll just go over to the next slide. Yeah, so what we're anticipating is a complete redesign of the council's climate change and sustainability pages. Your Future Solihull hub will capture all of the council related projects in one area. There's so much going on in the council, and it's about time really that it was all accessible in one place. Not just that, but it's also how residents can do more, and as well as the support for businesses that's available. On top of that, we're going to have a comprehensive list of all the council policies which are related to climate change and sustainability, and the hierarchy that they all bring with them. So we're planning to split the website into 6 key themes. So you can see the icons here. There's the low carbon future, nature and environment, transport and travel, buildings, waste, education and engagement. And within each of those themes, they'll have their own page with all the various projects related to them. So for example, transport and travel, there's so much going on in the borough at the moment with that one. So we'll talk about the connected autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles and the cycling and walking strategy. You'll see here we've got the draft website header at the top, which gives a bit of a street scene of the borough and some of the projects going on. You might be able to spot some of the projects there, like the connected autonomous vehicle and the electric vehicle charging points, and we're just trying to really bring the branding to life. Alongside the website overhaul, we're also developing a suite of high quality social media assets that you'll start to see on the council's feeds, and this is just to help build a strong brand identity. Yeah, so back to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into the new Your Future Solihull branding. And as I say, keep an eye for it to pop up around the borough. One of the first places you'll see it is on our new environmental contract in April, I think. It will be on the new waste vehicles and also on some flyers, collateral that you'll have through the post if you're a Solihull resident. So I'm now going to hand you over to Anne-Marie Atfield, who is our low carbon project manager, and Andrew Greenall, sustainability engagement officer, who are going to provide a bit of an introduction on the importance of becoming more sustainable and the council's net zero ambitions. Over to you both.
Hello, I'm up first. So unsurprisingly, you'll know that I'm Andrew Greenall, not Anne-Marie. So if we can have our first slide up then. So I'm going to be talking on, well, me and Anne-Marie are going to be talking on sustainability and climate change. So have we got our slides coming up?
Yes, 1 second.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk to you about what sustainability means. So if we skip to the first slide, please. So traditionally, sustainability is very much sort of rolled into environment. People think of sustainability, it's always environmental sustainability. It's how the planet's surviving, it's how trees are surviving. However, the key to how we get through to the next century, shall we say, is the fact that we've got to look at it. The environment is where society and economy operate. Without an environment, we've got no society, and without society, we have no economy. So these are the 3 pillars of sustainability that really sort of come together to sort of like encompass everybody's job and everyone's interest and concern. And the second part of the sustainability, the sort of the meeting the needs of the present without messing it up for the future, I'll paraphrase. So we can live comfortably now, but moving forward, we've got to think of future generations. So next slide, please. So why are we necessarily concerned with sustainability? Just what's the benefit? Is it all cost? Well, actually, it's not all cost. You know, the reason why we're doing this is to build a better future. It's to build a better now. All of the things that we're doing now have only got benefits. So sustainability is all about, you know, a greener, brighter, all those cliches. And I've sketched, you know, it's your future Solihull. So that's the initial intro to sustainability and what we're going to do. Now I'm going to pass over to Anne-Marie to talk a little bit more about climate change. So on to the next slide, and Anne-Marie.
Hello everybody, and through the process of elimination you've probably figured out that I'm Anne-Marie Atfield. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is the climate emergency and net zero, just to kind of set the scene. And having a sneak peek at the delegate list, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will already know quite a lot of this, but let's call it a recap. So the climate emergency, can we have the next slide please? The climate emergency means that urgent action is required now to reduce climate change and avoid irreversible damage. So that's kind of what the climate emergency means. And interestingly, scientific consensus that humans are altering the climate has now passed 99.9%, which is roughly equivalent to consensus on evolution or that smoking causes cancer. So it really, you know, the evidence is really there. Our climate's already changing and has already changed. We're at the moment, we're at about 1.1 degree of global temperature increase, or global warming as we used to call it. But so recently we've heard a lot about the importance of 1.5 degrees, and we've heard a lot about things like keeping 1.5 alive. And the reason why that's so important is because the difference predicted at 1.5 degrees of temperature increase and 2 degrees is so significant. So for example, at 2 degrees, we'd expect to see 90% loss of coral reefs. We'd expect to see a lot more people living in danger of climate change and much more extreme weather. Next slide, please. Closer to home, thinking about climate change in the UK and what that will be like. So we know we'll get warmer and wetter winters, hotter and drier summers, and more frequent and intense weather events. And some examples of what climate change, the impacts of climate change will be like in the UK. So heat waves could cause things like risk to public health, damage to buildings, impact of transport and other infrastructure. And the increased rainfall will be increased risk of flooding, including flash floods. We'll also have more risk from coastal flooding. Not so much of an issue in Solihull, as you can imagine, but you know, throughout the UK, it's a really issue, is a real issue. And also, importantly, impacts on farming. So available crops may change, growing seasons may change, and the reliability of crops may change. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what net zero is, and just really want to touch upon it. When we talk about net zero in a climate change context, we're talking about net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So, for example, carbon dioxide and methane. And net zero is basically a balancing act between the emissions we put into the environment, so things like emissions from our boilers, our power stations, our cars. So it's the balancing act between the emissions that we put in need to be less than or equal to the emissions we remove. So they're things like tree planting and offsetting. So yeah, we've got it's kind of this balancing act really. And what I wanted to say is that net zero emissions does not mean absolute zero. So it's kind of more about balancing the out and the in of greenhouse gases as opposed to getting to absolute zero. Next slide, please. So I wanted to touch upon what climate change ambitions are like, starting at globally and working our way down to locally. So most people have heard of the Paris Agreement, which seeks to keep global temperature increase well below 2 degrees C and really seeks to pursue that 1.5 degrees C I was just talking about. In the UK, we've got a net zero target of 2050, which is legally binding. And in the West Midlands, we've got that 2041 target. And then in Solihull, we've got a 2041 target as well. So we've mirrored that West Midlands target in Solihull. And that the reason why, and what that kind of looks at is we look across the whole borough for that 2041 target. So that's everything that happens within the borough, whether that's buildings, whether that's transport, and whether that's trees, and try to balance out those emissions by 2041. The reason why 2041 is important is because it's in line with that 1.5 degrees C. So it's a science-based target and it's Paris aligned. So it's really important that links back to that. In addition to that, as Mary mentioned earlier, we've got a target for our own operations as a council. So that's everything we do as a council of 2030. So our own buildings, our own transport. So just to recap, borough-wide, the whole borough is 2041. And just as a council, it's 2030. Next slide, please. So But we're going to talk about taking action in mine and Andrew's second slot today, but I just wanted to touch upon it now. When we think about taking action on climate change, it's really important we kind of work from the top down on this kind of pyramid. So it's about avoiding and reducing our emissions where we can. So that might be something as simple as walking instead of taking the car, if that's an option for you, or insulating your home. So avoiding and reducing first. Then we think about replacing emissions. So things like solar panels or buying clean electricity. And then finally, as a last resort, we offset. So when we talk about that balance of net zero, we're talking about kind of the top 3 things versus the bottom offset to balance out. And just finally, before I hand back over, it's really important to kind of remember that to get to net zero is going to touch all aspects of society. So it's really, really important that we acknowledge that actually getting to net zero is going to require everyone to act, and it's kind of that kind of we're in this together kind of mentality, and we really need to work together to get to net zero. So thank you for listening to Andrew and myself, and I'll hand back over to Sarah for the time being.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. So next up, we're going to play a couple of case study videos that 2 of our colleagues have kindly recorded for us. One is the first up, I think the first up is Shamina Villas, who's our environmental projects manager, who's talking about the exciting council initiative Planting Our Future. And the second video is Sarah Lardner, who's our engagement officer, who's talking about the brilliant sustainability work that she does with all our schools. Both Shamina and Sarah are available to answer your questions as well. They're on the webinar and we'll join in the Q&A. So if you've got any questions for them, as well as Andrew and Anne-Marie, please do pop them in the chat. Thank you very much. Sam, I don't think the sound is working. I think you might just need to try and reshare. Sorry with the sound. Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulty, but it does work.
Okay, give me a second. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam.
I just click share computer audio, but I'll try again. Increase computer sound. Okay, fingers crossed this one works. Sorry about this. Okay.
No, still not working. Sorry. Do you want to try Sarah's video?
Sure. Just loading that one now. Laptops. No. Okay.
Have you got the sound turned up on your computer, Sam?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay. This is going to be the one. You are now sharing computer sound. That's what it says. Okay, we'll send that live and I'll press play.
No, sorry, still no sound. We might have to come back to it. We'll go to Anne-Marie and Andrew's next section if that's all right with you both.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it did say sharing computer sound, but it's obviously not working. Okay, we'll stop sharing. We'll get the presentation ready.
Thank you. So I think in the next section, Anne-Marie and Andrew are going to cover sort of what we're doing as a council and how we can get involved in terms of sort of within our roles at the council, but also in our home lives as well. So hopefully it'll give you some nice hints and tips.
Hello, I think I'm on first. I was settling down there to just watch the films for 10-15 minutes. Caught me on the hop. Right then, so this next bit, we're going to talk a bit more about projects, actions that you can do. And first of all, if we go to the next slide, we can talk about the political will. So the council has made a statement, a climate emergency statement, and within that climate emergency statement, where it sets out to lead, it acknowledges that there is a climate emergency, and within that it sets out to set targets. So we've got a council target of 2030, so that's the council operations, and then there's a borough-wide target which is the 2041, and mine's the 2030 target and Anne-Marie's is the 2041, so it's either mine or Anne-Marie's. Now within that, there's action set, and they're, to some extent, they're the ones that you'd expect. You know, we've got to reduce our impact on the environment. You only need to look out the window. We can see the impact on our natural environment. Also sets out to restore somewhat the natural environment. So we've got projects around restoration. But one of the key elements that we need to go forward is there are going to be a lot of benefits to moving to a low carbon economy, a green economy. So make sure everyone benefits and no one suffers. Next slide, please. So how have we initially set out sort of like the overarching document? So the last 5 years, 6 years, we published a climate change prospectus, which seeks to generate activity across a number of themes. So we've got everything from, we've got the clean growth, which is the business side, the energy side, the waste side. So all of those elements. Clean air, which is to do with the travel and the transport, largely because we don't have sources of pollution in the borough, fortunately. Nature gain, and we're talking about back to that restoration, as much as it's about protecting what we've got in terms of the environment, the green environment, waterways. It's also about restoration. It's about making things better. And then the key thing to all of you guys sitting there thinking, well, none of this necessarily directly impacts me. It's about communication, education and engagement, and it's how we can learn and how we can communicate across to other people. So next slide, please. So then we sort of we move on to one key element of that is the net zero action plan, which is Anne-Marie, and Anne-Marie's just going to talk through that until she throws it back to me.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm going to talk through our Solihull's net zero action plan. We've actually agreed our plan recently, and the plan itself sets out the actions we can take to help Solihull as a borough get to net zero by 2041. And it very much focuses on what's within the council's gift to deliver and what's within our sphere of influence. Next slide, please. So the primary purpose of developing the Net Zero Action Plan was really around responding to the climate emergency. So it's a key part of our response to the climate emergency. However, we know we need to move towards a net zero society in a way that's as beneficial as possible to Solihull. So we wanted to consider lots of other things like green recovery, zero carbon growth, green jobs and skills, low carbon innovation. And these last two pillars are really, really key in our thinking around net zero and how we want to develop and deliver the plan. So thinking about just transition to net zero, which is a phrase we heard a lot about at COP, but really all that means is we want the movement towards net zero to be, our journey towards net zero to be fair to everyone. And the other aspect is really maximising co-benefits, because getting to net zero, we've got the opportunity to get lots of other benefits out of it. So things like better air quality, health benefits, money saving for residents or businesses, or even you know, better amenity from our natural environment. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about the plan itself. I wanted to sort of just highlight some of the challenge in our journey of getting to net zero. Our last reported year, which was 2 years ago, because that's kind of how the reporting works in terms of getting the data, we as a borough emitted 1.3 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent. So that's roughly similar to driving a diesel car around the world 200,000 times. And our emissions probably look a little bit different in terms of their makeup from other areas, in that we don't have a lot of industry. So our waste and industry segment's quite small, our agriculture segment's quite small, and we've got a very small amount of absorption from land use. So what that leaves us with is emissions that are split very much between our buildings and our transport, both domestic and non-domestic buildings and transport. Just to note that the 2030 target we were talking earlier, so our council's own emissions are less than 1% of that 1.3 million tonnes. So kind of what my bit kind of focuses on, the net zero action plan focuses on, is that 2041 target. So whilst we don't have control over the rest of those emissions, we do have a great degree of influence over some. So it's kind of focusing on what we can do in that area. Next slide, please. And I wanted to talk through some of the kind of key challenges that we're likely to see as we move towards net zero. So these can be common challenges across lots of different areas, but we know some key challenges for us will be things like having more efficient, warmer and greener homes, ensuring new developments support net zero, having things like active travel and public transport, and ensuring that we move, if that's not an option for you, moving towards cleaner vehicles. And I'm really sorry, my house alarm's just going off in the background. And if that's not an option, moving to cleaner vehicles such as EV technology, EV and alternative technologies, and things like ensuring the right infrastructure is in place. We also want to ensure community involvement. That's absolutely critical and a critical challenge in moving towards net zero. And we also know funding and financing is going to be a key challenge. One of the key things that's worth, we have to put our hands up and say, actually, we don't have all the answers yet. And if you followed any of COP, I think you'll probably reflects the fact that globally we don't have all the answers yet. So and across-cutting all these issues is really the need for engagement and behaviour change. Next slide, please. So in terms of what's within the plan, so what have we got actually in the plan itself? We know that the plan has got 54 goals and a whopping 203 actions, so it's a fairly epic document, and it covers everything from implementation of technology to a wide range of behaviour change and engagement actions. We've split the actions into action areas, so we've got domestic and non-domestic buildings, transport, waste and industry, energy supply, and then we've got council influence as well, which we don't have a little handy picture for. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all 203 actions because we'd be here till tomorrow, but what I will do is I'll highlight a few just key examples, or just some examples really, in each of the sections so you get an idea of what we've got within the plan. So in terms of domestic buildings, we've got things like insulating homes, providing support for households in accessing finance or in accessing energy efficiency measures. For non-domestic, we've got things like providing businesses signposting to support on how they can improve their energy efficiency, for example. Examples in transport include improving cycling routes combined with behaviour change measures, but also rollout of EV infrastructure and the like. And then in terms of waste and industry, we've got things like support for community groups in developing circular economy activities such as repair cafes. And in terms of natural environment, we would have heard from Shamina on tree planting, but so there is lots of stuff in there on tree planting, but there's also things around sort of improving our natural environment as well, and our natural habitat, and enhancing it. And then in terms of energy supply, we're thinking about renewable energy feasibility across the borough, but also about things like supporting community energy projects. And then finally, on this section, we've got council influence, so thinking about our own policies, our own behaviours within the borough as a council and how they can help us get to net zero. So that might be something like procurement or the like. And then, so really, again, cross-cutting all of this is behaviour change and engagement. Next slide, please. So finally, this is my last slide. So I've talked about through the plan itself, and I really wanted to say just a last few words on what happens next before I hand back over to Andrew. So agreeing the net zero action plan is really just kind of the start of our journey. You could say it's the easy bit. We've got a plan, we know what we want to do. We've now got to work out how to put that plan into action, and that's really the key challenge. And really we need to focus on delivering that plan and making sure the way that we do that is fair to everyone. Our plan itself, our net zero action plan, will be regularly reviewed and we'll be reporting annually on progress. And we're currently pulling together our implementation plan, and we'll need to engage with people across the council and across the borough and beyond to be able to deliver this plan. So watch this space. Andrew, over to you.
Why, thank you very much. Wait for myself to make for my slide to come up and me to come up on the screen. Right then, you can hear me, yes? Am I on?
All good, Andrew.
Yeah,
You're
excellent.
on.
Right then, so that was the borough. We need to keep our mind on the borough and the council. So what are we doing to address our council impacts? To start with, we've got our what do we do now? What are our actions now, and how are we going to drive our sustainability? This is broader than just net zero, remember. Net zero is just one element, so we're putting in sustainability plans. Secondly, we've been doing carbon management for a while now. We've got a net zero carbon council, net zero council carbon plan. If I got that the wrong way. That's for the 2031. So this is how do we get to 2030 in terms of being net zero? So what's our plan? How much are we going to be emitting in 2030? And then how much are we going to need to offset in 2030? We don't need to think about offsetting until 2030, but like everyone, you know, good pension planning is about thinking about it now rather than in the future. So we've got the wild card there of sort of like our getting to net zero. Next slide, please. So if we start considering what our sustainability action plans for each directorate are going to do, you won't necessarily have seen them yet. They're going to be rolled out over the next year, but within them, our action to deliver sustainability in terms of, right, so there's your partners, there's the supply chain, there's a huge amount of impact that's within there, you know, plastics, packaging, transport. So we're going to try and address that element within them. Then there's the service delivery, the more traditional way you're thinking about, you know, getting around the borough, how we operate, the cremators or the libraries, etc. So it's the delivery. But then one of the reasons I'm really excited to be sat here talking to you, it's about you and how your team, it might not be the biggest impact, but you can actually have tangible provide tangible solutions to these problems just by thinking about things differently. So if we can go on to the next slide. Now this is the bit that you may or may not be involved. I know there are people on this call that are, you know, intrinsically hello energy officer, our energy officer Sarah, who's doing work on this. There's lots of people who are working on this, shifting our sort of services to EVs, you know, looking at how we connect to the town centre heat network, but also the new ways of delivering services, our new ways of working and the like. So if we move on to the next slide, because that's the carbon management plan, part of some of the successes, and I wanted to use this one as an example of that hierarchy that Anne-Marie shared earlier. This is one of those things where we've done something in the correct order. So first of all, we started removing the lights that weren't needed. You know, there are regulations we might have overlit. So we looked at the sort of the how we did. At the same time, there was the plan to install LEDs. Now, again, LEDs far better in terms of energy efficiency. You know, they use half the amount or over half the amount of energy that a traditional bulb would use, but then they also create a better environment in some respects. White light is far nicer. And then to get to sort of like to do that last bit, we've replaced our supply with 100% renewable. So it's a low carbon service now. So if we move on to the next slide, we see this is one of the reasons why you want to be here is what can you do? Okay, so we can avoid doing stuff. We can avoid traveling to meetings. We've saved carbon just by sitting, some of us sitting at home and not traveling, for instance. Printing's always their classic, you know, printing, switching off, you know. I've put using single-use plastics, avoid using single-use plastics, not move to using single-use plastics. And then, you know, avoid waste by trying to recycle. Reduce, switch how you get around the borough. Can you go by bicycle? I'm not suggesting everyone is an alternative, but there are some areas of the business that's identifying perhaps using a bike, providing bikes, gives access to lower income or younger people transport that, you know, they can't afford a car. So we can switch, we can reduce the energy. Installing low energy lightings is the classic, and then, you know, replace where you can. I struggled necessarily in some of our things, but, you know, replace with still paper cups, you know, replace something with fair trade instead of your normal. Can we go on to the next slide? Now, not everyone's a doer, not everyone can be changing bulbs, not everyone can be planting trees, but this is the hierarchy of how we can do it. So we've got the doers in the middle, we've got the actors, you know, we can all switch off, we can all recycle, you know. However, what we can also do is we can all influence. I'm not going to say we're all influences. I'm not getting on TikTok. That's my line. But we can all be, and that's your role. We can all gain access to people. We can all gain accesses, and we can all support other people's strategies and things. I was at a conference last week and I asked a question and I said, who are the people who we don't normally get to work on our behalf? You know, I'll get engineers and the like to do things, but, you know, I mentioned hairdressers. Hairdressers are a great example of perhaps influencers that could sit and get people to talk about, you know, heating, fuel poverty. So don't think you're all passive. You've all got a part to play, and I'm going to leave it there, throwing the challenge back to you to get involved. And if you want, next slide, please. And if you do want to get involved, then there's me and Anne-Marie's details. So back over to Sarah and Sam.
Thank you very much both. Hopefully that's given everyone some top tips, and obviously you can find out more by contacting Anne-Marie and Andrew. We're going to give the videos one last try. I'm going to try and share them now. So let's try Shamina's. Bear with me, sorry, 1 second. No sound?
No sound, unfortunately, Sarah.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't seem to have the audio button on my screen, actually. The share audio.
Just scroll down, it's usually just there above the presenters and stuff, but it's not playing ball today.
Okay, sorry everyone. So we're going to go live to Shamina instead, and Chris. So we'll try and follow what was in the video, but hopefully you've seen that lovely picture there of Hope Coppis. So you've got to see the lovely places where Shamina is planting the trees. So Sam,
yes, and we can just
you're able to line
well,
up Shamina.
we can share the videos after the event, so you can view videos in your own time as well. That's really
Yes,
good.
we will do.
Okay, introducing Shamina and Chris.
Afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much for stepping in like this.
You're welcome.
So do you want to just introduce yourselves both first and your roles at the council?
Yep. So my name's Shamina and I'm the environmental project manager, managing the Planting Our Future campaign.
And Chris Edgell, public realm manager, so I'm responsible for parks and open spaces, anything green, and look after the Planting Our Future programme as well.
Brilliant. And so what, as part of your roles, what have you been doing recently in terms of the Planting Our Future project?
So we started the campaign about 2 years ago now. So we're looking to plant 250,000 trees in 10 years. So we've had the first 2 years. What we're looking at initially was kind of where we can plant the trees, making sure it's the right tree, the right place, who we can engage with to plant the trees. So we kind of started off by doing some press releases saying, do you want to plant some trees in your local area? Get in touch. Then we did kind of an audit of our own parks and open spaces. We worked closely with our fantastic forestry team to look at the right tree, the right place, where we could plant, who we could engage when planting. So we've got some wonderful community groups across the borough. We've got some fantastic schools who I know Sarah Lardner works with as well, to go out to schools with eco clubs. There's a load of businesses who want to plant trees at the moment, which is fantastic. So we basically engage with as many people as we could to either get land or get sponsorship and enable us to plant the 25,000 trees per year.
Yeah, can I just add a little bit to that? Yeah, so we're looking at planting 25,000 trees per year. So we have delivered on that for the first 2 years. We planted around 50,000 trees in the last couple of years. You will have seen Shamina over at Hope Coppice. So we were there a couple of weeks ago working with one of our partners, Severn Trent, to plant up the UK's first Commonwealth legacy forest. So if you do have some time to get over to Hope Coppice in Shirley, it's really worth a walk around. Have a look at that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both. That was great. I'm just going to hand over to Sarah Lardner now, so we can just hear a little bit about her work with the schools. So Sarah will chat to you for a couple of minutes, if that's all right. Thank you for coming on live as well. And then we'll move to the Q&A, so we've got enough time because we've had some great questions come in there. So Sarah, do you want to just roughly talk us through some of the projects that you work with the schools on? Oh, sorry, Sarah, I think you might be on mute.
Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Lardner. I'm the engagement officer in the sustainability team, and my main role is supporting schools with sustainability activity and helping them with their journey. One of the main things that I do is I run a Greener Schools Award. So schools send in their applications to get assessed at the end of the summer term, and they work on things like having an eco team that carry out lots of different environmental activities to make their school more sustainable. They get involved in various awareness days like Fair Trade Fortnight. There's lots of these different awareness days now linked to sustainability. And they also make, I don't know whether you've heard of the Sustainable Development Goals or the Global Goals, and they also work on these and embedding the global goals into the curriculum. So I work very closely with eco leaders in schools. It's usually a teacher that takes on the role and that supports an eco team within the school. And then I get the applications from the school in the summer term. It's great to see all the fantastic activities and achievements. So over the summer, I look through all the great applications. And then we have a big celebration in the autumn where I get lots of the teachers all sharing their best practice. And which is always a great event, and we get lots of business support as well. We've got businesses like Birmingham Airport, Touchwood, that actually reward the schools as well and provide feedback to the schools on their applications. So yeah, lots of business support. So it's a real joined up approach. So that's one of the main activities that I do, the Greener Schools Award. Then We have a big sustainable schools conference where I work very closely with a number of officers in lots of different teams. For example, the energy officer, waste and recycling officer, procurement, work quite closely with the Love Solihull, where we all come together and share all the opportunities and the work that we do with schools to support them on their sustainable journey, because it's not just me supporting schools, there's lots of officers all throughout the council that are there to help the schools with this agenda. I think that gives a bit of an overview of what I do. Is that enough?
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of all our presentations now. So thank you very much to all our brilliant presenters. We're just going to have a look through the Q&A. Obviously, we've got about 15 minutes, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. Unfortunately, on Teams Live, you can't have multiple cameras up at once. So Sam's going to do his best to try and toggle between the different people answering the questions. But feel free to start speaking, presenters, and Sam will get you up as soon as possible. So number one, we've got a question in from Sarah Barnes saying, asking, how does the West Midlands and Solihull 2041 target compare to targets elsewhere in the country? Is that one for you, Anne-Marie?
I think so, yeah. So it's a real range, really. When you look at the UK's climate, local authorities' climate targets, some councils don't have a target at all. Some have a target that focuses solely on their own operations, and some, like us, have both. When you look at the range, it starts from Nottingham is the first local authority area that are saying they're going to get to net zero, and they want to get to net zero at 2028, which is amazing if they do it. But it also depends on how you do it. So I think, and some councils have 2050. Which is the legal requirement. So there's a big range. If you're interested in having a look and a little nose about, a good place to look is actually the Climate Emergency UK website, because they list all the councils and all the ranges. So I think we're probably somewhere in the middle. And the reason why we've got 2041 is we wanted to take a bit of a pragmatic and practical approach whilst still taking a science-based approach. So that's kind of, I hope that answers that one.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Andrew, I don't know if this one's for you, but what is the single most important thing we could all do? It's a tricky one.
Oh my goodness me. There is, I don't believe there's a silver bullet for this one. I think, as I say with the presentation, where we can do stuff, but also the way we act and considering what we do. I was talking to some kids last week at school, and it's like, when you think about the common sense behind perhaps driving half a mile with a ton of vehicle versus walking the distance and so just considering what you're doing, considering whether it's sensible, I mean, with fuel prices, there's going to be some pain with that example. So in terms of what you can do, perhaps, you know, in terms of easy, start thinking about your impact. In terms of an actual solid action, switch it off and then look at insulating. I've got a recent, you know, catchphrase: insulate, insulate, insulate. That's how we're going to sort of work with our houses and our homes to reduce leakage. So there's lots of guidance out there. Act on Energy are there to help you with your home. So it's a big question.
Thanks, Andrew. I think Anne-Marie, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, there is, like Andrew said, there's no one answer to that one, unfortunately. I think it depends on your lifestyle. So if you live in a house that's very leaky in terms of energy or heat, then that's something you could look at. If you're somebody who you know, takes a lot of short journeys in a car, if it's not necessary for you to, then that's something you could look at. If you know, so it really does depend on lifestyle, and things like you know, eating a lot of meat or something like that. And you know, nobody's going to tell anybody to stop eating meat, because I think that would be a very unpopular thing to say. But so just really kind of thinking about what you do, like Andrew says, and looking at your kind of day-to-day lifestyle. But the biggest things generally for us would be transport and homes, really, in your everyday sort of life. So yeah.
Thank you very much. One here for Chris and Shamina around the tree planting. So Viv said that our tree planting target is very ambitious. Do we have enough land available and identified to be able to achieve it? So I guess there's a question there around how people can help find that land as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Viv. Yeah, it's the $1 million question, really. And as a council, we don't have that amount of land to fulfil that, but that's why we're working with private landowners. There's a lot of private land in Solihull, so it's just about how we can tap into that. And as Sarah says, really, if anybody's got any links with people that might have land that we can talk to, that'd be great. We're always plugging that one. But Shamina can talk a little bit about some of the more specific links that we have got at the moment.
So yeah, like Chris said, 70% of land in Solihull, a bit more, is private land. So we're working with a lot of private landowners. So currently working with National Trust, golf clubs, schools. So for example, this morning I was in Murstone School planting up a new hedgerow with them, as well as miniature orchard. Yesterday I was in Fordbridge School doing planting 10 cherry trees, but also a hedgerow. So we're talking about how we can also not only think about tree planting, but also kind of green corridors, so corridor creations for habitats, etc. So when you've got a road next to a school, you might want a hedgerow, so it's a carbon collecting hedgerow next to the road, cleaner air strategy as well, so it links in with a lot of other aspects. But also that's where we're going out to people and saying, you know, it doesn't need to necessarily be a big oak tree which will have a big canopy in the long term and take up that space. We can look at other species to make sure it is kind of the right tree, right place. And if you have a land, if it's a small pocket, if it's a great big field that you want to plant up, just get in contact and we can, you know, work with you around what's best for you in that land. So hopefully the more people that get in contact, the more trees we can plant and the more people we can work with to plant trees and put in that green infrastructure. That is so important.
Brilliant. Thank you both. Very exciting. So there's a couple of questions that have come in around that are quite similar. So one from Sue about how is the council going to influence the biggest polluters in the borough? It's great that we're not one, but in the leadership role, what are the short and long term plans? And also a question from Caroline around financial incentives for new and existing businesses to offer sustainable products and services, which I think all comes under one of the things that we're really hoping we can do with the Your Future Solihull website hub is to signpost for businesses. So the hub will be for residents and businesses, partners, stakeholders, and we'll have a business section on there where we will signpost off to all the different initiatives and funding that is available, and really put some information on there about why businesses should think about changing and what they can do. And there's lots of useful projects that are going on across like the Combined Authority and the LEP that we can link them in with. I don't know if Anne-Marie, you've got anything else on that one?
Just really to say, because there was a part of that question that was on timing, wasn't it? And actually you're absolutely right. Not everything can be done now, so our action plan is split up into a timeline. So we've got short, medium and long term actions. And yeah, absolutely, there's a real key role for us to help work with businesses to help influence them. But a lot of large businesses, so a lot of our bigger polluters polluters may be the wrong word, our bigger industries within the borough have actually got their own net zero targets for their own operations, so are already on that journey with us. So yeah.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So Mark's put in a question there about, are we going to mention where we stand in the tables now, because it was a good news story. So I think Mary mentioned it in her introduction very briefly, but Andrew, do you want to elaborate a bit more on our success in the recent yes.
Yes. I mean, we came second in the single tier and 5th overall, a little bit behind the West Midlands Combined Authority. So Councillor Courts was very happy with that, what with being a portfolio holder for low carbon with the Combined Authority. So yeah, it was a broad spectrum of questions about planning, activity. Me and Anne-Marie went through it with a fine-tooth comb, answering all the questions. We also came I think we were top 3 in a regional one as well. So we've come quite high with the benchmarking. And there's 2 elements. I think we're very good across the board. We do a lot across a wide range, from transport to wildlife ways to street lighting to energy and things like that. And we've got a long commitment to carbon management. 2008 was when we started this. So we've got some good grounding in all of this. How we will perform next year, that'll be interesting, because there'll be a lot of people biting on our tails, and we're going to actually have to act as well as plan. So yes, I mean, we can pat ourselves on the back for now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, that was great news. And another one for you here while you're on. So will we be undertaking further carbon accounting exercises in the coming years? And if so, how detailed will they be, and will they be accessible to the public?
Carbon accounting, it's inevitable, I think, is the thing. We've started to incorporate carbon is now in our midterm financial statement. So it goes to the budget, it goes into the budget strategy. So we've started to incorporate it. What with the forecasting work that we're doing as well, it's going to be in there. How we're going to do it is still on a blank piece of paper, but it's inevitable.
Thank you, Andrew. I think one for Chris here. So do we have any record of how the natural environment has improved over the last decades in terms of hard and developed land and surface and natural areas and vegetation cover?
I think that question's probably one to take away to the Claude team.
Yeah, we could do that. Find out some stats. Brilliant, thank you. Just having a look through. Anne-Marie, do you have any advice on the conversion around heat pumps from combi boilers, Anne-Marie or Andrew, and how we balance being early adopters to ensuring the technology is ready and the cost of that? I know there are other teams in the council looking at that.
So I haven't actually seen the wording of that question. So what I will do is I will say, because this reflects another question as well, and a bit of a plug for Act on Energy, I think, really, which is a free service for residents within Solihull to access, so they can get some free energy efficiency advice, some free advice on what you can do to your home to help you get towards that kind of, you know, energy efficiency position. In terms of heat pumps, I think again, this is something that's going to come in through time. It's going to be one of those ones that, you know, not everybody's going to turn around tomorrow and put a heat pump in their house, but, you know, we will start to see a gradual movement towards alternatives, especially seen as new build from 2025 will not be using gas boilers anymore. So certainly you're right, there's this balance, and at some point I think it will flip. But yeah, just a bit of a plug really for Act on Energy if anybody wants to access any help really on energy, anything to do with energy in your home, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sarah Lardner, I was just going to come to you and ask you, which is your favourite project that you work on with the schools, and how does it work?
I think I can't really say that I've got a favourite project, to be honest, but I've just talked about the Greener Schools Award, which I do really, you know, I think it's fantastic to be able to reward the schools and to celebrate all the activities that the schools do and share that best practice. But I'd say, well, I've just finished the Fair Trade Art Trail, which we always get lots of schools that produce artwork. This year it was the Choose the World You Want theme, and schools created 3D artwork, sculptures and collages, and part of their artwork was there was a world. You might have seen some of the great pieces of art up and down the high street and in the core over the half term, and last week. It's all being collected in now, I'm afraid. But yeah, the general public can get involved and go and view the artwork and take part in a fun quiz to learn more about fair trade and farmers and what fair trade does for farmers in the developing world. So yeah, I'd say the Fair Trade Art project is one of my favourite annual projects.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I realise that we're running out of time now. I've only got a few seconds left. So I just noticed one question from Telma on there about providing more information, and not just for homeowners, but for everybody. So we really hope, again, that the Your Future Solihull Hub will do a lot of this, and we're willing to take any feedback on that when it is live. Obviously, we'll push it out through all the normal internal channels. And if there's information that you think could be added onto there, and there's bits that you want to learn that aren't there, just drop us a line and and we'll try and add it on. So I just want to say another big thank you to all the presenters today, and thank you very much to all the attendees for joining. We really appreciate you taking the time. We hope you found it useful. Again, if you've got any feedback on the Lunch and Learn sessions, apart from the fact that the videos didn't work, then do let me know. You can find me in the phone book under Sarah Klossick. As I mentioned, the next session will be on the 7th of April, which will be around the Commonwealth Games, which is a brilliant, exciting project that's coming to Solihull, and everybody can get involved in that. So I've put the link in the chat as an announcement, but people, you'll be able to find it in the usual places where you found the link to register for this. So thank you everyone again. This recording link will be shared with everyone via the internal channels as well. So if there's anyone from your teams you want to share it with who wasn't able to attend today, you'll be able to do that. So thank you everyone. I hope you have a lovely afternoon. Bye.